In the early 1970s, Indira Gandhi was riding a wave of immense electoral popularity. Yet beneath this political dominance, the country she governed was fracturing. The strain began in 1971. The Bangladesh crisis sent 8 million refugees across the border, placing a sudden, massive burden on an already fragile economy. Tracking India's inflation in the early 70s, the baseline was already stressed. Then international shocks hit. The U.S. halted foreign aid, and global oil prices spiked. The result? A catastrophic surge. By 1974, everyday commodity prices shot up by 30%. Out in the rural areas, the monsoons failed. Agricultural output dropped by 8%, triggering severe food shortages, while unemployment simultaneously soared. Frustration boiled over into the streets. Students in Gujarat and Bihar organized massive protests, demanding relief from high prices and an end to corruption in high places. These scattered student protests found a leader in Jaya Prakash Narayan. A veteran social worker, he united these fractured groups under a single demand he called a total revolution, a complete overhaul of the political system. What began as localized anger mutated. It was now a coordinated, nationwide uprising aimed directly at dismantling the central government's authority. The friction extended beyond street protests. Inside the halls of power, the executive branch found its initiatives repeatedly blocked by the Supreme Court. Frustrated by these legal roadblocks, the government took a drastic step in 1973. They bypassed 3 senior judges to appoint a new Chief Justice, one aligning with their vision of a judiciary loyal to the ruling party's programs. The pressure intensified the following year. Millions of railway workers walked off the job, grinding the nation's transport network and its economy to a halt. Then came June 12, 1975. The Allahabad High Court delivered a bombshell ruling on an election petition filed by a rival politician. The court found that Indira Gandhi had used government servants in her campaign. The judgment was absolute. Her election to parliament was invalid, legally stripping her of the right to remain prime minister. With the economy in ruins, millions protesting in the capital, and the highest courts declaring her rule invalid, the executive branch was cornered. The administration had to choose between surrendering power or tearing up the democratic rulebook. On June 25, 1975, they made their choice. Citing a threat of internal disturbance, the government invoked Article 352 of the Constitution, officially declaring a state of emergency. The crackdown began immediately. Just after midnight, the government severed electricity to all major newspaper offices, ensuring no morning editions could report on the unfolding events. Under the cover of darkness, police executed a coordinated nationwide sweep. They arrested thousands of opposition leaders and political workers before dawn. By morning, fundamental rights were suspended. The state utilized a mechanism called preventative detention, allowing them to jail citizens indefinitely on the mere suspicion that they might commit an offense, completely bypassing the trial process. When power to the printing presses was finally restored, it came with a catch. Every piece of news, every editorial, and every report had to receive prior government approval before publication. But defiance took root. Several prominent newspapers refused to submit to state propaganda. Instead, they published their editions with the editorial columns left entirely blank. Writers and cultural figures joined the quiet revolt, returning their prestigious state awards in public protest against the silencing of civil liberties. For citizens, this was the reality of a suspended democracy. The state held absolute power to arrest anyone, and a Supreme Court ruling later confirmed that the doors of the judiciary were officially closed to those seeking their freedom. After 18 months of silence, the emergency ended as abruptly as it began. In January 1977, political prisoners were released from jails, and fresh elections were announced. The opposition had very little time to organize, but under the leadership of Jaya Prakash Narayan, factions that had spent years divided rapidly merged to form a single united front, the Janata Party. This election was fought on a single issue. The campaign focused entirely on the arrests, the censorship, and the abuses of the past year and a half, turning the vote into a direct referendum on the emergency. The verdict was decisive. For the first time since independence, the ruling Congress Party was defeated at the national level, and Morarji Desai took office as the new prime minister. To ensure this concentration of power could not happen again, the constitution was amended. An internal emergency can now only be declared in the event of an armed rebellion, and the prime minister must secure written approval from the Union cabinet. The crisis tested the limits of the republic, but the voters of 1977 established a lasting rule of Indian politics. Any government that abuses its democratic mandate will face the wrath of the electorate. Ultimately, the temporary suspension of democracy solidified its foundation.